What happens when a grieving mother refuses to go to her own daughter's funeral, becoming the target of her ruthless family? You won't believe how the truth of their broken relationship comes to light in the most unexpected way, leaving everyone speechless. Before I tell you the story, and trust me, it's a story you'll want to hear, do an old woman a favor and hit that subscribe button. It's not every day you hear about a mother who didn't bury her daughter because, as it turns out, her daughter had already buried her first. It all started on a Tuesday in my garden. The sun was just beginning to burn off the morning mist, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and roses. My roses. Specifically, the peace roses that lined the walkway. The irony is not lost on me. I was pruning them, my old shears making a satisfying snip with each cut. My hands, wrinkled and spotted from 68 years under the sun, moved with a practiced gentleness. This was my sanctuary, my quiet rebellion. My daughter, Sarah, had always hated these roses. "They're too fussy, Mom," she'd said on one of her last visits, her voice laced with that familiar, impatient pity she reserved for my life choices. All this work for something that just dies? I remember I just smiled because how do you explain that the work is the point? How do you tell your ruthlessly practical Ivy League educated daughter that tending to something beautiful and fragile is the only thing that makes sense in a world that constantly tries to break you? You don't. You just keep watering the roses. I had just clipped a perfect cream-colored bloom, its edges kissed with the softest pink, when the phone rang. It wasn't the friendly, intermittent chirp of my cell phone. It was the shrill, demanding ring of the landline, an instrument reserved for telemarketers and emergencies. It sliced through the garden's peace and sent a murder of crows scattering from the old oak tree. A bad omen, I suppose, if you believe in that sort of thing. I believed in bad timing. I left the perfect rose on the garden bench and walked into the cool silence of the house, wiping my dirt-stained hands on my apron. The house was too quiet these days, filled with the ghosts of 30 years of memories. I picked up the receiver on the third ring. "Hello? Am I speaking with Mrs. Eleanor Gale?" The voice was young, male, and completely devoid of emotion. The kind of voice that has been trained to deliver bad news with professional detachment. "This is she," I said, my throat suddenly tight. "Ma'am, my name is Officer Ramirez. I'm calling from the California Highway Patrol. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your daughter, Sarah Jenkins, was involved in a traffic collision this morning." He paused, and in that sterile 5-second gap, my entire world tilted on its axis. "Ma'am, she didn't survive. I'm very sorry for your loss." Sorry for your loss. The words were a script, a meaningless string of syllables. My mind didn't process them. Instead, it played back our last conversation, a venomous, crackling, long-distance argument from the week before. It was about my grandson, Leo. I'd said something, I can't even remember what now, something about him needing more of her time, less of her ambition. A stupid, clumsy thing to say. "You have no idea what it's like, Mom. You just sit there in your perfect little house with your perfect little garden, judging me. You never see me. You only see your own fears." Then the click, the dial tone, an ending. I had waited, stubbornly. I told myself I'd let the anger cool before I called back. I was always waiting. Now my wait was permanent. The phone rang again almost immediately, jarring me from my trance. I knew it wouldn't be the police this time. It was my sister Carol, her voice a frantic buzzsaw of panicked energy. "Ellie, oh my God, Ellie, have you heard? It's just awful. I talked to her husband, Mark. He's a wreck. The funeral's in 3 days. I've already looked at flights for us out of Boston. We have to be there. For Mark, for Leo, for..." She was a whirlwind of logistics, a master of disaster management. Carol could plan a funeral with the same brisk efficiency she used for her garden club's annual luncheon. I looked out the window at that single, perfect rose I'd left on the bench, already starting to wilt under the strengthening sun. My voice, when it came out, was a hollow whisper that didn't sound like my own. "I'm not going, Carol." The silence on the other end of the line was heavier than any words. It was a thick, suffocating blanket of disbelief and judgment. Then her voice, stripped of all false sympathy, turned to ice. "What did you just say? What do you mean you're not going? Eleanor, for God's sake, it's your daughter! What will people think?" And there it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What do you need?" But, "What will people think?" In that moment, I felt the first shovel of dirt land on my coffin. My grief was irrelevant, my pain an inconvenience. All that mattered was the performance. I had just refused to take the stage, not realizing that this one simple act of honesty was about to ignite a firestorm that would change everything. The next 2 days were a siege. I had foolishly plugged the phone back in, thinking I needed to be reachable for, well, I'm not sure for what. For some official piece of information, perhaps? Instead, I had opened the floodgates. Carol, naturally, led the charge. She called again the next morning, her voice having shifted from icy disbelief to a syrupy, manipulative concern that was far more infuriating. "Ellie, I've been thinking," she began, as if she'd done anything else. "I know you're in shock. It's a terrible, terrible shock for all of us. But you can't let the grief make you do something you'll regret for the rest of your life." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a single crack in the ceramic tile that I'd been meaning to fix for a decade. Regret. It was a word I was becoming intimately familiar with, but not for the reasons Carol thought. "This isn't about grief, Carol. This is about honesty," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "Honesty?" She practically spat the word. "What is honest about abandoning your family when they need you? What about Leo? Have you been thought about that poor boy, losing his mother and now his grandmother won't even show up to say goodbye?" Ah, yes. The grandson card. A classic maneuver. I swirled the cold coffee in my mug. Inside my head, I was screaming, "What does Leo need, Carol? Does he need to see his grandmother, who he's seen maybe 5 times in the last 10 years, put on a performance of sorrow? Does he need to watch me accept condolences from your bridge club friends who wouldn't know Sarah from a hole in the ground? Is that what will heal him?" But I didn't say any of that. Instead, a memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Sarah, at 17, standing in this very kitchen. She'd won a statewide debate championship. I had her trophy in my hands, a heavy, garish thing with a golden eagle on top. I was bursting with pride, so fierce it felt like my ribs would crack. But the words that came out of my mouth were, "Well, that's wonderful, dear. Just don't let it get to your head. Colleges look for humility, too." I saw the light in her eyes flicker and die. She'd snatched the trophy from my hands, her jaw tight. "Of course," she'd said, her voice dripping with a sarcasm that would become her native tongue. "Heaven forbid I should actually enjoy a victory." She'd spent the rest of the night in her room. I had wanted to knock on her door to tell her how breathtakingly brilliant she was, but my own mother's voice was in my head, whispering that a proud parent was a vulgar one. So I had said nothing. My silence was a language we both understood perfectly. A new call broke my reverie, a number I vaguely recognized. It was my cousin, Michael. His voice was a stark contrast to Carol's. It was calm, reasonable, and deeply patronizing. "Eleanor, Carol told me you're, not feeling up to traveling. I just wanted to reach out. We're all worried about you." Worried about me? Or worried I'm going to embarrass the family, I thought. I'm fine, Michael, I said. Look, Ellie, I get it. It's hard, but a funeral, it's a ritual. It's about showing respect. It's the right thing to do. The right thing to do? According to whom? According to a society that values appearances over authenticity? The whole conversation felt like a checklist. I imagined him on the other end ticking a box. I called crazy cousin Eleanor to talk some sense into her. My life, my daughter's death, my grief. It was all just a problem to be managed, a wrinkle to be smoothed over before the relatives arrived. They weren't burying Sarah. They were managing a public relations crisis. Thank you for your concern, Michael, I said, the words tasting like ash. I hung up before he could offer any more useless wisdom. I looked at the telephone sitting on the counter. It wasn't a connection to the world, it was a weapon they were using against me, call by call. I walked over to it. My movements were slow and deliberate. I didn't just hang up the receiver. I followed the cord to the wall and yanked it out of the jack. The plastic connector made a small, unsatisfying pop. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of being completely, utterly alone. I had built a wall against their judgment, and in doing so, I had sealed myself into a tomb. A tomb of my own making, yes, but a tomb nonetheless, and I believed I would be left alone in it. I had only silenced their voices, after all, not their judgment. And I had no idea that the most critical confrontation was yet to come, not over a phone line, but right on my very own doorstep. The day of the funeral arrived under a sky the color of a dull, unpolished nickel. I didn't need to look at a calendar to know. I could feel it in the air, and the oppressive silence that the unplugged phone had left behind. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, people were gathering. They were putting on black dresses and somber suits, practicing their sad, sympathetic faces in the mirror. They were preparing to mourn a version of Sarah that existed only in their imaginations. I couldn't stay in the kitchen. Every surface seemed to hold a memory of an argument or a stilted conversation. So I went to the one place in the house that was purely about the past, the attic. The pull-down stairs groaned in protest as I lowered them, releasing a puff of cool, stale air that smelled of cedar and thyme. Up here, under the gentle slope of the roof, the world fell away. Dust motes danced like tiny fairies in the single beam of light from a grimy half-moon window. Against the far wall, beneath a collection of old holiday decorations, was the wooden chest. Sarah. Her name was painted on the top in my own looping cursive from a lifetime ago. My knees complained as I knelt to lift the heavy lid. Inside, her childhood lay dormant. The first thing I saw was her favorite doll, a Raggedy Ann whose yarn hair I had rebraided 1,000 times. Then, a stack of school notebooks, the pages filled with her precise, determined handwriting. I pulled out a frame drawing she'd made in first grade. 2 stick figures with wild sun-yellow hair holding hands under a smiling sun. Mom and me, the caption read. A lump formed in my throat. When does that girl, the one who draws you holding her hand, turn into a woman who can't stand to be in the same room with you for more than an hour? I dug deeper, past ballet slippers and a collection of sea glass in a jam jar. At the very bottom was a thick photo album. I opened it. There was Sarah at 7, looking profoundly serious in a fluffy, ridiculous-looking duck costume for a school play. Even then, she was herself, solemn, intense, a little out of place in a world that wanted her to be cute. Another photo, 10 years later, holding that debate trophy, her smile tight, triumphant, but her eyes already guarded. I remembered my clumsy words of caution, my fear that her ambition would carry me too far away from me. I see it now. I wasn't afraid of her failing. I was afraid of her succeeding. That's when my fingers brushed against it. A plain white envelope, yellowed at the edges, tucked beneath the album's velvet lining. It wasn't sealed. There was no address, just one word on the front, in Sarah's familiar teenage script. Mom. My hands trembled as I unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It was a letter she had written right before she left for college, a letter she never gave me. Mom. It began. I'm leaving in 2 days, and I'm so scared I can barely breathe. And I'm angry. I'm so angry at you, and I don't know how to say it. You look at me, and I know you love me, but you never say the words I need to hear. It's like you're afraid of me, afraid that I'll get too big for this house, for this town. Don't you see I'm doing all of this to make you proud? I get the best grades, I win the trophies, I get into the best school I can. Why can't you just look at me, just once, and say it? Why can't you just say you're proud of me? The paper crumpled in my fist. The dam I had so carefully constructed inside me for days, for years, for a lifetime, finally broke. The tears came, not the quiet, dignified tears my sister would expect, but racking, silent sobs that shook my entire body. I wept for the 17-year-old girl who just wanted her mother's approval. I wept for the mother who was too choked by her own fears to give it. I sat there on the dusty floorboards of the attic, clutching a ghost's plea to my chest. I was so lost in the storm of it all that I didn't register the sound at first. It was the sound from the outside world, a world I had tried so hard to shut out. A car engine cutting off in my driveway, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel, and then a car door shutting with quiet finality. Someone was here. For a long moment, I stayed frozen on the attic floor, the sound from outside seeming to come from another world. My first thought was a surge of pure, unadulterated anger. Carol. It had to be. She'd gotten on a plane after the funeral to come here and deliver her final in-person condemnation. Or maybe Michael, delegated by the family to be the voice of reason. I braced myself for a lecture on duty, on appearances, on my epic failure as a mother. With a groan, I pushed myself to my feet, my joints creaking in protest. I tucked Sarah's letter into the pocket of my cardigan, its crinkled edges a secret comfort against my skin. I didn't bother to wipe the tear tracks from my face. Let them see it. Let them see the mess they refused to acknowledge. I descended the creaking stairs and walked down the hallway, each footstep a heavy thud of defiance. When I reached the front door, I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pulled it open, ready for battle. But it wasn't Carol. It wasn't Michael. It was Leo. My grandson stood on my doorstep, looking like a boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. His black suit was a size too big, the shoulders slumping, and his tie was knotted just a little too tight, as if he'd done it himself. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, but he stood tall. He was 16, but in that moment he looked as old as I felt. He was alone. "Grandma," he said, his voice quiet. "Leo." The name was a breath, a question. "What are you doing here? The service?" He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shrug, his gaze fixed on the worn welcome mat. "I couldn't stay there," he said. "All those people, talking about her like they knew her, it just felt fake." His words struck me with such force, I felt my carefully constructed defenses begin to crumble. He wasn't here to accuse me. He was here because he felt it too, the suffocating hypocrisy of it all. He finally looked up, his eyes, so much like Sarah's, searching my face. There was no judgment in them, only a deep, unnerving sadness. "Aunt Carol's really mad," he stated, not as a threat, but as a simple fact. She she told Dad that you didn't come because you never really loved Mom. He held my gaze. That's not true, is it? I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head, a wave of emotion so powerful it stole my voice. A single tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. I know, he said softly, and it was as if he had reached out and stilled the storm inside me. After After everything, he continued, fumbling in his suit pocket, I was helping Dad clean out her car. I found this. He pulled out his hand and opened it. Lying in his palm was a small, worn leather keychain. On the end of it was a single, intricately carved rose. I stared at it, my breath caught in my throat. A rose. My fussy, high-maintenance roses, the very symbol of the gulf between us. And she had been carrying it with her. It was a secret message, sent from the other side of a chasm I thought was uncrossable. I took the small token from him, its cool leather a comfort in my trembling hand. He said she'd just bought it last week. And, Grandma, there's something else. I looked at him, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The night before the accident, I heard her on the phone with Dad. She was planning to call you. He swallowed hard, his own composure starting to crack. She said she'd been a jerk. She said she was wrong and that she wanted to make it right. The words hung in the air between us, a ghost of a conversation we were never meant to have. In that single shattering instant, the angry phone calls, the passive-aggressive sympathy cards, the entire weight of my family's judgment, it all dissolved into meaningless static. The battle I thought I was fighting wasn't the real war at all. And now, holding Miss Tiny Rose and my grandson's gaze, I finally understood what I had to do to truly honor my daughter. We stood there in the doorway for a long moment, the unspoken truths of 3 generations swirling in the quiet air between us. The heavy, ornate grief of the funeral home was 1,000 miles away. Here, in this small space, was the real thing, fragile, complicated, and desperately sad. "Come in, Leo," I said finally, my voice thick but steady. "Let me make you some tea." He nodded, giving me a small, grateful smile as he stepped inside and took off his ill-fitting suit jacket. In the kitchen, we didn't speak much at first. I filled the kettle, my hands moving with the familiar, grounding rhythm of habit. He sat at the table, the same table where his mother had once raged and dreamed, and traced the crack in the ceramic tile with his finger. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything that had just been said. When the tea was ready, I sat down opposite him. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out the crumpled, tear-stained letter. Without a word, I pushed it across the table toward him. He looked at me, then down at the letter, recognizing his mother's youthful handwriting immediately. He read it slowly, and I watched as his expression shifted from sorrow to a kind of profound, aching understanding. "Wow," he whispered when he was done, carefully folding the paper and pushing it back to me. "She never learned how to say it, did she? What she was really feeling?" He looked at me, and his eyes were gentle. "Just like you, Grandma." It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple, heartbreaking observation of a trait that had been passed down like the color of our eyes, a legacy of unspoken love that had cost us so much. And in that moment, I loved him more than I thought possible. The next day, Leo and I went out into the garden. The sun was out, bright and warm, and the world felt new. We didn't talk about the family, about the angry messages I was sure were waiting on my phone. They didn't matter anymore. We walked over to the peace roses, the ones that had started it all. With a shared shovel, we dug a small, neat hole in the rich earth beside them. This was our funeral. I took out the letter, kissed it one last time, and placed it at the bottom of the hole. Leo took the leather rose keychain and laid it gently on top of the letter. We weren't burying my daughter. We were burying the pain, the silence, the misunderstanding. We were letting the ghost go. Then, together, we filled the hole back in. Over that spot, we planted a young magnolia tree, its roots promising strength, its buds promising beauty. A few days later, I finally plugged the phone back in. It rang within an hour. It was Carol. Her voice was cold, clipped, and full of a lingering, self-righteous fury. "I hope you're happy with yourself, Eleanor," she said, dispensing with any greeting. "You managed to embarrass this entire family. I just want you to know that." A week ago, her words would have crushed me. They would have been another shovelful of dirt, burying me deeper. But now, they were just noise. They couldn't touch me. I said goodbye to my daughter in my own way, Carol, and I found a peace with it that I haven't felt in years. I took a breath. I am truly sorry that you can't understand that. I ended the call before she could respond. I didn't need to hear any more. I hadn't buried my daughter. Sarah had buried me long ago, layer by layer, with every argument, every misunderstanding, every mile of distance she put between us. She had entombed me in a fortress of her pain and my silence. But in the end, it was her son who came and handed me the key. It was her love, in the form of a tiny leather rose, that finally led me out of the darkness. Standing in the garden, with Leo by my side and the sun warm on my face, I looked at the new magnolia tree. I was no longer buried. I was planting something new. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to watch it grow.